Working with Elon and his team, I'm really excited for our industry and for the Ford customers. We're announcing that in early 2024, all of Ford's existing customers and future customers would have access to 12,000 Tesla superchargers across the U.S. We're really excited about that. About a year later, we're going to be equipping our Fords when we go to our second generation electric vehicles with the NACS interface. Elon, I want to thank you and your team.
Yeah, that just happened, and the implications are profound. But wait, there's more. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Yesterday on Twitter Spaces, Jim Farley, Elon Musk, and Farzad. Wow, dude, nice way to get on there with these guys. Anyway, they were on Twitter Spaces to make an announcement that Ford and Tesla are going to have a much more intimate relationship than they have had in the past. And that is super cool. If you haven't seen my episode on Twitter Spaces yet, you should definitely check that out. I did that yesterday. I think that this is another, way of Elon Musk in a meta way putting to bed mainstream media. So first politics on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, we have a major announcement by a major auto company, not on mainstream media, not in traditional interview format, but on Twitter Spaces. So Elon is working really hard on this. I would take a guess, just as a sidelong thing, that we are going to see video versions of Twitter Spaces come along, not in the too distant future. How's that? I think that a lot of times audio is fine, but for these kinds of things, I think a lot of times people want to actually see the players involved. So I have a feeling that there will be Twitter Spaces with video capability coming. Eventually, I know there's a lot to build out in order to do that. That's pretty complicated because there are, if you have hundreds of thousands of people, you could have major glitches. But anyway, I think that will be coming relatively soon, probably start in beta form and, increase from there. All right, and on to the announcement. So it sounds like to me it was a little bit unclear whether this was an immediate thing or early 2024, but soon, no matter what, 6 or 7 months at the most, we're going to be looking at Ford's being able to use the Tesla superchargers that have Magic Docks enabled. That's the big block that adds on the CCS charger onto the Tesla supercharger, or NACS, or North American Charging Standard, which is the much more elegant Tesla supercharger standard that they open sourced recently and turned into a standard. If you haven't seen my video on that, you should definitely check that out. I've been saying for a long time, I'm like, this is the elegant engineering solution. This is the case of VHS and Betamax back in the early 80s. Betamax should have won the race. It's a much more elegant standard for video cassette recording and everything. And hopefully what will happen with this announcement is, because we're going to get to the other part in just a second, is that NACS is going to become the standard, at least in the US, Canada, and Mexico. And of course, that brings us on to the other part, which is sometime in early 2025 with the Gen 2 vehicles from Ford, they are going to be using the NACS, or Tesla Supercharging Standard. More on this in a moment, but first, do you remember how awesome it was to eat cereal as a kid? I sure do. But as we grow up, we start to feel like we can't enjoy our food like that anymore. Well, Magic Spoon has something to say about that. Why not have that great taste, but in a no sugar, no gluten, low carb cereal? Magic Spoon has great flavors like cocoa, frosted, fruity, and my personal favorite, peanut butter. And the boxes are awesome too. Look how colorful and fun they are. And each serving only has 4 grams net carbs, so it's keto friendly, 0 grams of sugar, so it's great for my low sugar diet, and 14 grams of protein, which is more than 2 eggs worth of protein. And the best part, it's totally delicious. Not only do I and my wife Misinformation love it, but even our picky eater teenage son loves Magic Spoon. So we have a new cereal the entire family can enjoy. Click the link below to grab a variety pack today, and be sure to use the promo code Dr. Know-It-All at checkout to get $5 off any order, or go to magicspoon.com/Dr. Know-It-All. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen and use the code Dr. Know-It-All for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/Dr. Know-It-All to save $5 today. And now let's get back to it. So first of all, this is part of a series of amazing moves on Ford's part. They really are being incredible about this and very open about it. Jim Farley, I got to give the guy credit. They split apart their gas and their EV revenue figures and showed just how, how much blood they're spilling, or blue maybe in this case, they're spilling building EVs right now, how much it's costing them. But that is, Jim Farley said in this Twitter Spaces, that gives them motivation. It's like, here, it's transparent. We can't hide it. You can see exactly how much money we're losing. We are now motivated to get this into the profitability category. So good on them. As always, I felt like Ford is the only other car company, I believe, in the United States, aside from Tesla, that has not gone bankrupt. And so hopefully that will continue to happen, and we will see Ford come out of this whole situation as a major player. These are all moves that I think are destined to make them even more of a major player. And of course, the big part of this announcement that I'll get to in a moment is going to have an even bigger impact on that, I do believe. So first of all, of course, you might be asking, like, why is this even a big deal and worthy of an announcement with Tesla? Because it's the North American charging standard. Tesla released it. They didn't just open source it. It is now a standard. They have nothing to do with it. You can just use it if you want to. And by the way, if people are paying attention to Ford, there might be an interesting little Osborne effect that could happen here, where people might decide to go, wait, I'm going to wait for the Gen 2 vehicles. They're going to have the North American charging standard. They're going to have fewer batteries so that they're more efficient. They're going to have other things I'm going to talk about in just a second. There are a lot of reasons to wait, but of course, many consumers don't really pay that much attention. And of course, Ford is not selling hundreds of thousands to millions of these EVs a year. So it's a relatively small market still for the next 18 months or 2 years until they can release their Gen 2 vehicles. But also in early 2024, it sounds to me it was a little bit unclear again what exactly was going to happen in the timeline, but it sounds like what Tesla and Ford are going to do is make an adapter that will allow the vehicles to work with the Tesla superchargers NACS without having to go through that Magic Dock adapter and stuff like that. So it sounds like their current customers will be able to get some of the benefits of the Tesla supercharging standard and at home charging for that matter as well, if they choose to do that. And speaking of that, on the hardware front, aside from the fact that this is a much more elegant solution, it's not so prone to breaking things because it's not a big block that's super heavy. It fits in really well. It works well. Like, what else on the hardware front makes a difference with this? Well, the other really big thing is that this is an AC and DC charging standard. So at our house, of course, we've got our plugged into an AC outlet, and we use the same adapter. We don't have to have the two different pieces of the CCS standard. And that's the reason why there are the two pieces. One is DC and one's AC. This thing works with both. So it works with that at home on AC. And then when we go travel, like I was doing yesterday, driving down to Florida, you can plug it into a DC fast charger and it works just fine with that too. So it's very brainless. You don't have to think about any of that stuff. It just works. So it's really elegant from a hardware standard. But the really cool part here is that Jim and Elon talked about how they're going to be marrying the software and how Tesla is going to be opening up their API to Ford, which is the application programming interface, which basically means that Ford, from their own software, is going to be able to make calls to Tesla's supercharging API and be able to get most of, if not all of the functionality that Tesla's currently do in terms of being able to query the superchargers to see if they're up and running, to see how many other people are using those superchargers, to route to those superchargers, to know where they are on the map, all of that kind of stuff. Opening up the API means that Ford will be able to have a very similar experience, assuming that they do their software well. You'll have a similar experience to the way that Teslas operate, which is that I said I wanted to go from Lake Nona, Florida up to my home yesterday. It just routed it. It's like, here you go to this place, stop for this amount of time, go to this place, stop for this amount of time. It's just able to do all of that stuff, and it's super elegant and super seamless. If you have not driven a Tesla on a road trip, it is really worth doing that just to experience how beautiful this is. And then we can add full self-driving on top of that. And when you do, the driving experience is totally different than it is with a gas car or other EVs. It's a real revelation to do a road trip in a Tesla. So anyway, this is a much bigger deal than just the hardware. It's like, okay, fine, it's more elegant hardware, but also having access, full integration with the software, with the API calls, all of that kind of stuff is going to be absolutely gigantic. And with any luck, CCS will die on the vine and the US government will stop supporting that, and it will start putting all of their effort behind the North American charging standard. So with Ford publicly announcing this, who else might follow? I think this is going to open some floodgates. My prediction is the likely next follower would be Hyundai Kia. I think that they would be very likely to follow along. They seem very forward thinking, and in the United States, at least in North America, Canada, and Mexico, it seems like a no-brainer that they would also want to join in on this and be able to utilize those charging standards and Tesla superchargers and have access to the hardware and the software. So my prediction is that they will probably be next on board again. when you make predictions, you're probably wrong. But anyway, that seems like the likely thing. And then potentially VW might do this, but they seem to have too much pride now. If Herbert Diess was still in charge of VW, no question. In fact, they probably would have been first, but now they're not. And of course, GM also has way too much pride, and who the heck knows what Stellantis is doing. They're kind of becoming irrelevant. The other thing, though, is that probably Chinese manufacturers, as they come into the United States, will take a really hard look at this. So BYD specifically is going to make movement into the United States eventually. And as they do that, there's a high degree of likelihood that they will talk to Tesla, or they might not even talk to Tesla. They might just use the charging standard, because again, it's a charging standard. You don't have to talk to Tesla to do this. So they might just do it. But in order to get the full integration, the app integration and all of that kind of stuff, it might be worth talking to Tesla about that. I don't know what kind of financial arrangement they have. There may be some licensing fees to utilize the APIs and things like that. From a fiduciary, responsibility point of view, that would make sense that Tesla would do that. Tesla is clearly for the public good. They want to be able to ensure that everybody can transition to electric vehicles and make it as seamless as possible, but they also do have a responsibility to make some money. So hopefully they're capturing some licensing fees for allowing Ford to use their APIs. But anyway, I see Chinese manufacturers, specifically BYD, and the likelihood is that Hyundai, Kia will be doing this as well. But GM, VW, those guys, Stellantis, I think they'll be further down the line, and they may be dragged kicking and screaming if the CCS standard goes away and it becomes obvious that that's, like using a Nokia after the iPhone came out. It was like, what the hell are people still using this thing for? So anyway, they might do it eventually, but I have a feeling they are not going to be the leaders of this flood. This then gets us to the next point, which was that Jim Farley started talking about the fact that too many batteries are put in cars currently. Now, I don't include Teslas in this, and I don't think he's including Teslas, because basically what he's saying is, look, Tesla's figured out how with a 75 kilowatt hour battery or a 55 kilowatt hour battery or whatever, a pretty small battery, I know that's big still, but relatively speaking, with a small battery and an excellent supercharging network and excellent efficiency in the car, that you don't need these bigger batteries. And so he's saying that their second generation vehicles are going to cut down on battery size and depend on the supercharging network to be able to do longer road trips, and the ability to charge faster and to charge more conveniently is going to offset any reduction in range that comes from having smaller battery packs. And of course, you have to build more efficient powertrains and all of that kind of stuff. But this is great for Ford because, again, remember that every battery you put in one car is the battery you can't put in another car. So if you can reduce the amount of batteries you need in a vehicle by 20%, that means that every 5 cars you produce, you get one freebie. You get one extra car by reducing the battery. So reducing the battery is the major stepping stone to mass scale. If you can reduce the amount of batteries you need in a car, you can produce more cars. That is the major bottleneck currently for producing electric vehicles. And this is an excellent sign to see from Ford that they're like, yep, we're going to make things more efficient. We're going to reduce the ostensible range, but what we're going to do is make use of the North American charging standard to be able to offset that, because people can very conveniently charge. And just in case you're thinking to yourself, well, I can't sit at a supercharger for 25 or 30 minutes to charge up, remember that Tesla is rolling out a next gen supercharger that's going to be way faster, and they're not standing still. It's not like what you get today is what you're going to get in 5 years or something. It's going to get better. The charging speeds are going to get faster. The batteries are going to be able to handle faster charging. All of that stuff it's going along, it's moving, it's evolving. We're not standing still. So your 25-minute charging time might eventually be reduced to 10 or something. And 10, it takes 2 or 3 minutes at least to fill up a gas tank. It's certainly a big one. And so you start to reduce the differential between filling up a gas tank and an EV. And again, remember, that's only even an issue when you have to go someplace. If you're at home, you just plug it in at night and it's just done in the morning. You don't have to think about it. So that differential, if it only becomes maybe 200 or 300% of filling up a gas tank, is going to become so small that it's not going to be a big deal, because it's just not going to be something that even matters most often. And the fact that you don't have to travel to a gas station most of the time means that you actually save time in your general life. In fact, I think that's already the case, because I never have to go to a gas station, so I don't have to waste whatever amount of time it is that I would have to drive to the gas station, fill up the car, go pay for it, all of that kind of stuff. That is saved every single week that I'm not having to fill up the gas tank. And then, of course, I spend more time at superchargers when I go on road trips, but I don't do that many road trips. So I think it balances balances out pretty well already. But as charging times come down and continue to come down and charging gets more effective, we're going to see that balance eventually switch in favor of EVs. And let's not forget from Tesla's point of view that their superchargers are effectively gas stations, which means that now they're not only building the cars, they're also building the gas stations of the future, which means that they are going to be capturing revenue from these other vehicles that come in and charge up. And currently what they have is they have a subscription thing, so you pay a certain amount, and then I believe you pay pretty much exactly what Teslas do at these superchargers that have magic docks and so forth. But anyway, I don't know what their deal with Ford is going to be, but it could be that Ford in the background will pay that subscription fee for a period of time, maybe a year, so you get it for free, and then you have to do it yourself afterwards or something along those lines. But anyway, Tesla is going to be capturing revenue no matter what from their superchargers because they're going to be making 30, 40, whatever cents per kilowatt hour as other cars are charging in addition to Teslas. All right, now let's turn to this other gem from Jim Farley and Elon Musk.
I think I've learned that, and also the embedded electrical architecture, fully updatable vehicle. Like, it's super hard what Tesla's done. And I totally respect them, to do that, to make a fully software updatable vehicle. And we're in the process of doing, but it's super hard.
It's super hard, yes. Well, I mean, Jim, we're happy to be helpful in other respects with, on the software front. There may be, some, something where we can be helpful there, in the same way that like maybe Android is, helpful to the phone industry as sort of a general standard. Like we could potentially open source more code, and we'd love to be helpful in any way that we can.
So what you heard from Jim was an admission that doing over-the-air software updates is really hard, which number one means it's really hard and amazing that Tesla's been doing this for 10 years basically, and nobody else has caught up. It's sort of like SpaceX landing rockets. It's like, wait, nobody else is still doing this after 8 years? I think they landed the first one. So anyway, it's that same sort of thing. It's like they make it look easy, but it's actually really hard. It also means that Ford is working on over-the-air software updates. They're working on improving the back end, the software that's running these vehicles and making it updatable over the air, which again, big gigantic congratulations to Ford for working on that so hard. But the real kicker here is that Elon started talking about open sourcing parts of their software stack. And that indicates to me that we're looking at Tesla really focusing on releasing their full self-driving stack. I believe that that would be the part. Now, there could be other things too, like the battery management system, the powertrain drive system, all of those kinds of things. Those are low level, and certainly Tesla could be involved in that as well, because that would be very important to improve the efficiency of vehicles. But much more intriguingly would be full self-driving. If we look at the R&D costs versus amount of time that Tesla has spent, they've spent somewhere around 7 or 8 years focusing very, very specifically on full self-driving. They have spent untold billions of dollars on this, right? They pay people a lot of money to work on this sort of stuff. They collect a lot of data, which costs a lot of money for storage. They have huge processing farms that they're working on to train this. So it's a lot of billions of dollars. I don't even pretend to guess, but I don't think it's the single digit billions. It's in the tens of billions of dollars, how much they've spent. And it's taken them 8 years approximately to do this. And we're still looking at somewhere around a year to 2 years from now before we're going to get to that sort of full robo-taxi sort of thing, at least according to current projections. So you look at this as another car company, and yes, these other car companies, there are lane keeping assistants and things like that, but they are far, far behind. I was just talking to my son yesterday who was driving a Toyota, and he was like, oh yeah, it does the same thing as Tesla's full self-driving. And I'm like, what does it do? He's like, well, it lane keeps on the highway as long as there's traffic around you and the turns aren't too big and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, right? I mean, that stuff is the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy thing to do. What Tesla has done is gone, there's exponentially more difficult to do what they're doing. So anyway, if you look at these companies, they've got to start asking themselves, do I want to spend billions of dollars and potentially a half a decade or more to build out something that just matches what Tesla does, rather than just licensing from them? Or, again, if Tesla ends up open sourcing some of this stuff, they could end up getting a lot of this for free, just like free research, essentially. So it's just a no-brainer. Why would you spend all of this time and money? I mean, hell, if they were licensing this for $1,000 a vehicle, how much time would it take to spend $10 billion in licensing fees? It would take a long time. So the obvious solution is just to get behind the leader and license that technology. And the really amazing thing here is that if Tesla Tesla does open source some or all of this full self-driving, that would make that a standard as well. They could do that and say, this is a standard IEEE or whatever. You make it into a standard, and that means that everybody in the world, at least that's using electric vehicles with the hardware stack and all of that kind of stuff, would have access to this technology. We do, of course, get back to the fiduciary responsibility of Tesla to their shareholders and making sure that there is revenue capture from all of this. But remember that there's hardware aspects of this as well. There's the full self-driving board, all of that kind of stuff. So I believe that Tesla would be able to work this in a way that they would still be able to revenue capture, but at the same time make it much, much easier. In other words, grease the wheels, allow these other companies to be able to get to this state much, much quicker than they could if they were trying to do it from scratch on their own. And if this is indeed the case, and Ford has been working on this for a while, because it sounds like they're working on over-the-air updates, they're working really hard on software, they may already have made some initial research investment with Tesla to figure out if their cars can use it, how their cars can use it. They may have test vehicles driving around with cameras and Tesla's full self-driving hardware in it, without showing people or anything like that. So they may be at a stage where they actually are actively researching this stuff. If they're already doing that, and if this announcement comes about in another year or something, this is a very different thing. When I talked about the Osborne effect with charging, I was like, it's not going to be that big a deal. People aren't going to pay that much attention. But if they announce the full self-driving stack too early before they can produce the cars and actually sell those cars, that could actually make people not purchase the Gen 1 vehicles. So I would see that they wouldn't want to talk about this too early. But if and when they get to the next gen vehicles and it has the hardware built in, and Tesla open sources or licenses the software to Ford as well, that is going to open the floodgates. And remember, we're talking about early 2025 at this point. So if Tesla has not solved full self-driving by then, it's going to be quite obvious that they haven't done that. But I think that the odds are incredibly high, unless the log curve really levels off, and they don't think it's looking like that we're going to have, at least if not full self-driving in terms of robo-taxis, at least level 4 full self-driving. So under most conditions, you don't actually have to pay attention to the road, even if you're sitting in the driver's seat. So I strongly hold the opinion that by early 2025, we're going to be at least at that state, and regulatory stuff is going to be happening at the same time. So this is perfect for Ford to jump in right at that point, because they get a freebie. They don't have to do all the research. They don't have to take the risk. They don't have to spend the money, but they get the benefit of that, and it makes their cars look amazing compared to other vehicles. And that means that every other auto manufacturer had better be licensing this software and hardware as well. And what's really interesting to me, looking at the statistics of Tesla's full self-driving safety, which they have published in their impact report, it's somewhere between 4 and 5 times safer using full self-driving with a human in the loop than it is to just drive a vehicle on your own at this point. And that means that there's a kind of not just a financial imperative, but a moral imperative, not only from Tesla, but from all these other vehicle manufacturers to utilize this software and hardware, because it saves lives, it saves injuries, it saves property damage, all of that kind of stuff. It is a moral imperative that people start utilizing this software, because right now, not next year, not 2 years from now or whatever, right now it makes us safer drivers, and that is huge. All right, so that is a whole bunch of stuff that came out of this announcement last night. Again, the fact that it was on Twitter Spaces is huge. The fact that Ford is definitely using the North American charging standard and working with Tesla through their APIs to enable Ford's software to work on the same level as Tesla's software, the fact that Ford is looking at reducing battery size so that they can scale up and compensating for that by utilizing Tesla's amazing charging network, the fact that Tesla is looking more and more like they're going to become the de facto gas station of the future, which is amazing for Tesla revenue, and biggest of all, the possibility that Tesla might open source their full self-driving software. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it, and of course consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon and YouTube channel members, and also welcome to all of my new Twitter subscribers. I can't believe how many people have already signed up. I think it's like 70 already. It's just crazy. So anyway, I will be releasing exclusive content on that, including somebody asked, I asked a question. I said, what do you guys want to see? Somebody said, walk us through all of the stuff you've got back behind your set. So that will be one of the first Twitter exclusive videos that I will do, and I'll walk you through all the junk that's back there. And of course, if you want to join any of these just check out the links in the description.
And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out.
And finally, once again, a big thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring today's video. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.